Welcome to Bradford Cathedral's Bradvent calendar. Today we're going to be making star biscuits that you can hang on your tree or share with a neighbour or just enjoy eating. Hello, welcome to Bradford Cathedral. Today we're making Christmas star biscuits, something that I feel the whole family and even your neighbours might enjoy. So without further ado, let's find out what you need. There are lots of recipes you can use for making star biscuits, but today I'm going to use the following. 75 grams of butter, softened. You can use either slightly salted or you can use unsalted butter depending on how healthy you'd like to be. And I tend to try and always go organic where I can. And then we're going to use 100 grams of plain white flour. And again, this is local and organic, so a great flour to use. We're also going to use some caster sugar, 75 grams. Important to always look for this little fair trade symbol there, the mark. That reminds us that when you're using this sugar, the farmers that have produced it will be paid a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. And that means that their children will be able to go to school, they'll be able to afford medicine when they get ill, and they'll have really good food on their table to eat. Then you're going to need 1 egg yolk. Again, we love all animals and creatures here, and so looking after chickens is just really important. So make sure your eggs are for free-range chickens, because then they're much happier. We're going to use half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Again, this is an organic cinnamon. And if you want, you can also add 1 or 2 drops of vanilla essence, but that's optional. You can also, if you really want to be festive, put a little bit of freshly grated orange, but today I'm keeping it simple. Of course, the biscuits are much more fun if you decorate them. To do that, you need some icing sugar. Again, see if you can buy icing sugar with the Fair Trade logo on. Mix that with water. You can add a few drops of lemon juice. And then once you've done that, you can decorate your biscuits with something like silver baubles I've got here. You'll need some star cutters to be able to cut your biscuits out. And you will also need to be able to make a little hole to tie your string. And I'm going to use these straws. Now, these are paper straws, so they're really good for the environment. And then, of course, some nice festive coloured string to tie up your stars when you have made them. And 1 or 2 other things you need to help you do this. You're going to need some grease-proof or baking paper, some baking trays to bake your biscuits on, something to roll them out, and I found this rather pretty roller. It's got a pattern on, but you can use a plain roller, it's fine. And then of course you need a mixing bowl, a wooden spoon, and your trusty measuring spoons. So it's time to get mixing. We're going to start by putting our caster sugar into the bowl and our butter. And then we're going to mix that until it's pale and creamy. It's much easier if you make sure your butter is at room temperature. Now, when you think you've blended that in and it's beginning to be nice and smooth and creamy, it's time to add your other 3 ingredients. So that's your egg yolk, your flour, and half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Now, if you put the egg straight into the butter, it won't mix very easily, but the flour will help to bind that. So I'm going to pop my egg in there, begin to mix it around a bit. And I'm only going to add a little bit of the flour to begin with, just to help bind it. Try not to do what I just did, which was to flick flour up at yourself. And I don't want to forget the cinnamon, so before I mix much further, I'm going to put half a teaspoon of the cinnamon. So I'm going to take my very trusty measurers. The cinnamon will give it a really nice Christmassy flavour. So we'll just sprinkle that in there. Pop the lid on and keep mixing. And then I'm going to add, and I think it's beginning to mix, the rest of the flour. We want this to be quite a stiff mixture because we're going to be rolling it out. So put the rest of the flour in there and keep mixing. Just be patient, try and mix it nice and evenly without getting yourself covered in flour, but wearing an apron will help you. And then hopefully it'll be ready to roll out. So when it begins to look nice and crumbly, it's ready to, well, get your hands into the mixture. Now I'm wearing rings and probably not a good idea to have your rings on, so I'm just going to slip my rings off while I do this. Make sure your hands are really super clean. You should wash your hands regularly throughout. And what I'm going to do now is get this mixture and bind it together, but using my hands to put a bit of pressure on and get the dough together, making sure I get all the crumbs from the bowl. And this eventually we're going to be rolling out, so the warmth from your hands will help bind it together and the butter will slightly melt. That's providing you've got nice warm hands, of course. So nearly there. Just really putting a little bit of pressure on. I want to get every last crumb because these make really nice biscuits and we want to get all the biscuit mixture that we can. And when you think you've got it all in a nice little ball, which is what I'm trying to do, we're going to wrap it in a little bit of, I'm going to use cellophane, but you could use a bit of tin foil, and then we're going to pop it in the fridge for 30 minutes. Now I'm using cellophane, but if you use tin foil, remember that when you take the tin foil off, to recycle it. Right, so I think that's ready. So I've got a plate here and I'm going to use a little bit of cellophane. I'm going to wrap this up and then we're just going to pop that in the fridge for 30 minutes. Whilst that's chilling in the fridge, it's time to clear up the sides and to get the oven preheated. You'll need to heat it to 180 degrees or gas mark 4 or 350 degrees depending on your oven. Your oven should be nice and warm, ready to go. And when it is time to cook, we're going to use the middle shelf. So time to clear up all your ingredients, give the work surface a nice clean, and then you're going to be ready to roll out, and you're going to need your flour, a rolling pin, and of course your star cutters. So I've cleaned my worktops and now we're ready to get the mixture out of the fridge. But you need to make sure you've got your baking tray ready. You need 2 layers of parchment on there. I've got my rolling pin, I've got my flour ready to dust the surface, my trusty straws for making holes, and of course my star cutters. So let's get this out of the fridge. So my dough is lightly chilled. Now remember, only leave it in for 30 minutes. If you leave it in for longer, it will become rock hard and almost impossible to work with. So before I unwrap it, I'm going to put some flour onto my work surface. Just a little bit of flour there. Some people like to sieve it, but I'm just going to sprinkle it. There we go. I've got my rolling pin. Now, I'm not sure whether this is how you should do it. This is just how I do it. So I make sure it's nicely floured before I begin. And then I'm ready to get my dough. Here we go. So here's the biscuit dough. Oh, doesn't that look great? So I'm just going to begin to shape it with my hands before I start using the rolling pin. Make sure there's a light dusting of flour, not too much flour because nobody wants too much flour on their biscuit, but just enough. And because it's quite chilled, it cracks as you begin to press it out. So be gentle with it to begin with. And I'm going to just gently begin to, look at the pretty pattern on there, begin to roll this out. We'll just keep going with that. Now, the reason we're doing star biscuits, stars are a wonderful reminder of the Christmas story. The thing about stars is, well, the God of heaven made them to begin with. And stars, well, they give us hope. But it was a star that guided the wise men to go and find the baby Jesus. It was stars that lit up the sky when the angels suddenly appeared and spoke to the shepherds and shared the good news with them. And of course, it was a big star that stayed over the stable where Jesus was born. So stars are an important thing that reminds us about God's love for each one of us. And when we look up at the stars, we're reminded, well, there's more to this world than meets the eye. Stars are amazing things. They are billions of light years away, and they are a source of light. They're incredible things, stars. And when you get a chance, go and have a look at the stars at night time and look to see if you can find some patterns. Usually the brightest star you can see is the North Star. And see if you can spot that this evening after you've baked your cookies. So keep rolling until they are, I think my mixture is just about 1 centimetre thick. We don't want it too thin, but we don't want it too thick either, otherwise, well, it won't bake as crisp. Now, I know there's a few cracks in the mixture, but don't worry about that. So again, I'm going to use a little bit of flour on the side, and I'm going to use my star cutter. Now, you can make your stars a variety of shapes, or you could just go with one size. I'm using this. If I dip it in the flour first, it just means the dough won't stick to it. So I'm going to start, here's a nice big space for my first star. So I'm going to give that a nice little, there, take it out. And then before I put it on the tray, I'm going to then take the straw, I'm going to dip that in flour again, make a hole, which when this is baked, we'll be able to put our string in, and then I'm going to pop that on the tray. So I'm going to keep on going with my star cutter, finding a space that hasn't got a crack. There we go. Each time remembering to use my straw to make a little hole. There we go. So keep going. I'm going to alternate with some slightly smaller stars as well. And this just gives a little bit of variety. Now, when you're baking your stars, it might be worth thinking about what you're going to do with them. Of course, you might want to just eat them all up. Who doesn't love biscuits with icing on? But you could also put them on your tree, which is why we're putting the string on. Or how about put them in a pretty bag with some ribbon and give them to a neighbour. It's the kind of thing, particularly if you've got a neighbour that you know has been living by themselves, maybe a little bit lonely this Christmas, and it will bring a little bit of joy to them as well. So we're just going to keep doing that until we've used up all the mixture. And of course you can re-roll your mixture when you're done. So I'm just going to quickly do this now. Keep popping those biscuits on there. So I've got my dial set at 180, and I'm going to pop these biscuits in the middle of my oven. There we go, being careful not to catch your fingers. And I'm going to leave them in there for about 8 to 10 minutes. So the biscuits are beginning to go golden brown. Now it's time to take them out of the oven. I've got 2 sets in here. The top one is ready. And here we go, being really careful not to burn yourself. So here are my biscuits. And they need to be completely cooled before we decorate them. So I'm going to put them over on a surface that will take the heat, and then carefully put them onto a cooling rack. Once your biscuits have completely cooled, it's time to decorate. I'm decorating mine on a tray just to catch any of the ingredients. Because I want to decorate mine with these pretty silver balls, you know, well, they can be a little bit naughty and fly all about the place. I'm going to pop these in a bowl first. Just kind of saves you having to run around the house chasing them. So we'll pop some of those in there. Look how they bounce, aren't they? They're just so much fun. Okay, so aren't those fun? Can't wait to use them. Now, you could put your icing in a bag, or you could do, which is what I'm going to do, which is just dollop a nice blob of white icing on. The icing needs to be fairly firm, but loose enough to actually use. I've mixed this with water and just a couple of drops of lemon juice. And I've got several teaspoons here to help me. So small amount on my teaspoon, and then I'm going to pop that on my biscuit. And then I can use the other teaspoon just to gently spread that around, a little bit into the star shapes. Now, some of you are going to be really artistic at this, but I was never very good at icing, so mine are going to look a bit blobby, but I have a feeling yours could look a lot better. Now, if you want to be really super duper clever, you could use red icing, maybe green icing, and put patterns in. But for this, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. So a little bit more drop up there. There we go. And then when I think I've got enough icing on there, I'm going to put some silver balls on. think I'm going to make those into a nice pattern. I wonder, can you see what I'm doing there? Gently press them down. So I'm going to put some more there. Now, of course, with most things in life, you can use as little or as much as you want. So I'm going to put those there. Another one at the top there. And I think I'll put just a few more in there because, oh, there we go. One trying to escape already. Try and decorate my stars. Now, another little thing to remind yourself not to do is if you get icing on your fingers, wash your fingers and dry them thoroughly, because if you keep sticking them back in the bowl with the silver baubles, well, you're going to make those very sticky and difficult to use, and you're not going to use all of them unless you go completely crazy decorating, and you want to be able to reuse them, and you can only do that if you haven't covered them in icing sugar. So there's ours, and I'm going to put one in the middle. As I said before, you can put as much or as little as you like. So keep decorating your biscuits. You can decorate them however you like. But you know, it's much more fun if you are doing this with the people you're living with. It may be your family or it might be a friend, of course, being COVID safe. Keep decorating them until, well, you've decorated all your biscuits. I'm going to continue, but give them a few minutes to dry, and then we're going to put the ribbon. So here's my little piece of ribbon. It's a red piece of string I'm using. So carefully threading my piece of string through. Now, if you leave your biscuits probably about 10 minutes so that they dry, maybe 15, this will be easier. But for the sake of the film, I'm doing it a little bit quicker. Going to tie a simple knot in there. There we go. And again, making sure you've got clean hands when you do this. You don't want icing sugar all over your string. And there is your biscuit, and you are ready now to hang your biscuit on the tree. Or you could, if you've got a nice little gift bag, stack your biscuits in the gift bag and give them to a neighbour or a friend, particularly if your neighbour is living by themselves. So there you have it, our star biscuits. So enjoy them. Don't forget, share them around, because sharing makes a really big difference to, well, how we all feel. And Christmas is a time of sharing. I hope you've enjoyed watching this film today. And on behalf of all of us at Bradford Cathedral, we wish you a very happy and joyful Christmas.